My son handed me a scratch ticket at Thanksgiving dinner and laughed while he did it. That's the part people ask about first when I tell this story. Not the part about the forged signature, not the $42,000 he never paid back, not the email I found sitting on my kitchen counter 3 days later. People want to know about the scratch ticket. They want to know about the laugh. So I'll start there. It was the third Thursday of November. 22 people gathered in my son's father-in-law's dining room, in a house that sits on the waterfront side of Chickamauga Lake, the kind of property that real estate listings describe as executive lakefront, and normal people describe as too much house for one man to rattle around in alone. My son's father-in-law is 65 years old. He retired early from running a commercial development company, and now spends his time making sure everyone in the room knows it. He has a 42-foot pontoon boat docked 40 yards from his back porch. He gets his hair cut at a salon. He wears a Rolex the color of a sunset. I drove 45 minutes to get there. I brought a peach cobbler, made from scratch, using the recipe my wife wrote, in her own handwriting in a spiral notebook I still keep in the kitchen drawer. My wife has been gone 6 years. Pancreatic cancer. It happened fast. The cobbler was the only thing I could think to bring that would have meant something to her, if she'd been able to be there. Nobody touched the cobbler. I'm 63 years old. For 31 years, I taught AP United States History at Ridgeline High School outside of Chattanooga. I retired 4 years ago when my knees started arguing with the linoleum floors. I live in the house my wife and I built together on Missionary Ridge. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a porch that faces west so the sunsets land right through the kitchen window. The house is paid off. It was the one thing we got completely right before she died. My son is 35. He went into commercial real estate after a few years of false starts, tried insurance, tried finance, finally found his footing in property. He's good at it. He married his wife 4 years ago, a woman who grew up in that lakefront house, who learned to measure people the same way her father does, which is to say by their address and their income, and whether those two things are something to be proud of or not. I don't say that to be mean, it's just true, and I spent too many years pretending it wasn't. At Thanksgiving, my son's father-in-law sat at the head of the table and accepted congratulations on the new marina property his company had acquired in October. People brought him bottles of wine I couldn't identify by sight. His daughter, my son's wife, circled the table, refilling glasses and laughing at things her father said before he finished saying them. After the meal, during that stretch where the table is half cleared and everyone is too full to move, my son stood up. He had an envelope. He gave it to his father-in-law with both hands, like it was something ceremonial. Inside was a booking confirmation for a 5-day elk hunt in Montana, private lodge outside of Missoula, guided expeditions, all meals included, round-trip flights from Chattanooga in first class. He announced the number, $6,800. The table erupted. My son's father-in-law stood up and clapped my son on the back. His wife covered her mouth with her hand. 3 people said, "Incredible," within 10 seconds of each other. Then my son reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper and slid it across the table toward me with 2 fingers, the way you'd slide a bar napkin. "Here you go, Dad. Tennessee lottery. Maybe luck finally comes your way." He grinned. Someone at the table laughed. Then someone else did. The kind of laughter that fills a room when people want to be on the right side of a joke. I picked it up. It was a $2 scratch ticket. The corners were soft from sitting in his pocket. He had bought it at a gas station, probably on the way over. I looked at my son. He was already turned back toward his father-in-law, still smiling, still basking in it. He didn't look at me again. I folded the ticket and put it in my shirt pocket. I said, "Thank you." I said it quietly, the way I've learned to say things in rooms where no one is listening anyway. Then I picked up my fork and finished my sweet potato. Across the table, my daughter was watching me. She had driven up from Knoxville for the holiday, still in her scrubs because she'd come straight from a shift at the ER. She wasn't laughing. She was watching me with an expression I recognized from when she was a child and had just seen something unfair happen on the school playground. That specific combination of anger and sadness that comes from understanding the world too clearly for your age. She caught my eye and I shook my head slightly. Not here, not now. I drove home in the dark with the cobbler on the passenger seat, still in its dish, covered in foil. I put it in the refrigerator and stood in the kitchen for a long time listening to the house settle. My wife used to say old houses breathe differently at night. She said you had to learn their rhythm. That was 2 days before I found the folder. My son had called the Sunday after Thanksgiving, said he needed to stop by to use my printer. His, he said, was broken. He came over, went down the hall, printed what he needed, left inside of 20 minutes. He was distracted, kept checking his phone, and he left a folder on the counter beside the printer. Manila folder, rubber banded shut. I almost called him back. I had his number pulled up on my phone, but he'd already pulled out of the driveway. The tab on the folder read, Morse Ridge, Listing Prep. My address is 1847 Missionary Ridge Road. I took off the rubber band. Inside was a listing agreement for my property, my house, my address, my name printed as seller. The asking price was listed at $287,000. My son's real estate firm was named as the exclusive listing agent, with a 3% commission. There was a signature line for the seller. My name was printed below it, and above the line, there was a signature. I had never signed that document. I had never seen that document. I set it on the counter and stood very still for a moment. Then I kept reading. Behind the listing agreement was a zoning variance application, a request to reclassify my property from residential to light commercial use. The application included a property appraisal. At current residential zoning, the house was valued at $287,000. Reclassified as commercial, it was valued at $415,000. My son had not mentioned any of this to me, not once. Behind the zoning application was a printed email chain. The most recent message at the top was from my son to an address at a commercial development company I recognized, his father-in-law's firm. The message read, Prescott, the Missionary Ridge parcel is moving forward. Owner doesn't know the scope yet. We're positioned for Q1 close. Commission splits as discussed. Owner doesn't know the scope yet. I read those 5 words 3 times. Then I put everything back in the folder, replaced the rubber band, and set it exactly where I'd found it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the chair in the front room, the one that faces the window overlooking the ridge, and I thought about the 6 years since my wife died. About how my son had drifted, not suddenly but steadily, the way a boat drifts when someone slowly lets out the rope. I thought about 3 years ago, when he came to me needing money to expand his firm. He needed $42,000. He said it would take 2 years to pay back. He said it was a bridge loan, just until a big commission cleared. I didn't ask for paperwork. I had the money in a savings account, the kind of account I'd built up over 3 decades of living carefully, and he was my son. The 2 years came and went. When I asked, he said things were complicated. When I pressed, he said he was working on it. When I finally sat across from him at his kitchen table last spring and asked him directly, he looked at me like I had said something embarrassing and told me I needed to understand how business cycles worked. I didn't ask again after that. I called my daughter the next morning. I told her I needed her to look at something, but that it needed to stay between us for now. She said okay without asking why, the way people do when they've been waiting for a particular kind of news and have already decided how they'll respond. Then I called Kendall. Kendall and I have been friends since the early 90s. We coached Little League together, back when my son and his kids were small enough to need help with the batting stance. He practiced real estate law for 20 years before he semi-retired, and he still handles occasional cases for clients he trusts. I trusted him completely. I drove to his office on a Tuesday, brought the folder with me, made him copies. He read everything while I sat across from him and watched the light change through his window. When he finished, he took off his glasses. Irving, he said, do you know what a forged listing agreement is in Tennessee? Tell me. It's fraud, real estate fraud, civil liability, potentially criminal, and this. He tapped the zoning application. This shows intent. He wasn't just cutting corners. He was positioning himself to make a $128,000 spread on the difference between residential and commercial value, using your property without your knowledge or consent. I nodded. Has he said anything to you about selling the house? He mentions downsizing every few months. Says the house is too big for one person. Says I'd be more comfortable in a condo somewhere. I always change the subject. Kendall looked at me for a moment. What do you want to do? I told him I needed a week. That Friday, my daughter called. Her voice had that particular lightness she gets when she's trying to seem casual about something she's not casual about at all. Hey, Dad, that scratch ticket your brother gave you at Thanksgiving. Did you ever check it? It's on my dresser. Go get it. Sweetheart. Go get it, Dad. I went and got it. She stayed on the line while I found a quarter on the nightstand and scratched 3 small rectangles at the kitchen table. The numbers underneath matched the winning combination printed in the corner. I scratched it again to make sure. Then I got my reading glasses. $60,000. I set the ticket down. My daughter was saying my name on the phone. I'm here, I said. What happened? He's going to wish he'd bought a more expensive ticket. I want to be honest about what I felt in the days that followed, because it wasn't triumphant. It was tired and sad, the way you feel when something you have suspected for years turns out to be entirely true. I had raised my son. I had watched his first baseball game and driven him to his first job interview and sat beside him when his mother died. And now I was sitting in Kendall's office, filing a formal complaint with the Tennessee Real Estate Commission about a forged document bearing my name. Kendall handled the lottery prize claim through a trust he helped me establish. Tennessee law allows winners to remain anonymous through a legal entity, and Kendall suggested it before I even asked. My son didn't know. His wife didn't know. His father-in-law didn't know. I went about my days. I shoveled the walk after the first snow. I called my daughter on Sundays. I reorganized the stack of old student essays I'd been meaning to file for 3 years. My son called twice to ask if I'd thought any more about the move. I let both calls go to voicemail. His messages were cheerful, patient in the way a salesman is patient, carefully calibrated to sound like a son. He texted once, "Dad, spring is the best time to list. Just want to make sure we don't miss the window." I read the message and did not respond. My daughter asked me one evening when I was going to say something. When it's ready, I told her. How will you know? When I stop feeling sad about it and start feeling certain. She was quiet for a moment. Is there a difference? There should be, I said. For what I'm about to do, there should be. The week before Christmas, my son and his wife flew to Cancun. His father-in-law had paid for it. 5 nights at an all-inclusive resort on the Yucatan Peninsula, an early holiday gift. My son sent me a picture from the airport, the 2 of them in front of a departure board. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had no concerns about anything at all. I texted back, "Have a safe trip. Let's do a family video call before Christmas. Wednesday the 20th, 7 p.m. I have some things I want to share." He wrote back immediately, "Sounds great, Dad. Looking forward to it." I called my daughter, "Wednesday at 7. "I'll be there," she said. I called my son's father-in-law directly. I had his number from years of family gatherings. He sounded surprised to hear from me. I kept my voice even and told him it was a family matter, that I hoped he'd join the call. He said he would. I spent the next 4 days organizing everything, printed documents labeled, put into a shared drive with Kendall's help. I tested my laptop screen share 3 times. I wrote down 5 things I wanted to say and practiced them in the quiet of the front room until they stopped feeling like speeches and started feeling like things I had simply earned the right to say out loud. Wednesday came cold and clear. My daughter logged on first from her apartment in Knoxville, still in scrubs from her shift. She looked at me through the screen and nodded once. No preamble needed between us. My son and his wife connected from Cancun at 7:02. He was in a resort polo shirt, already tan, a drink on the table behind him. His wife sat beside him in a sundress. They looked like a photograph of people who had never worried about anything. His father-in-law joined last from his lake house in a blue button-down. He looked mildly curious, the way powerful men look when they've been asked to attend something they consider optional. "Hey, Dad, what's the occasion?" my son said, smiling. "Big announcement?" "Something like that," I said. "Thanks for making time. I'm going to share my screen." The first document that appeared was the listing agreement. I watched my son's face move through several things at once. Recognition first, then something calculating, then the beginning of a performance, the reasonable explanation he was already assembling. "Dad, that's just." "I didn't sign it," I said. "That signature is not mine. I have 31 years of my own signature on student records, parent letters, and school documents, and I've provided samples to the Tennessee Real Estate Commission. Their fraud examiner received my complaint on December 15th. Silence. "What listing agreement?" His wife leaned forward toward the screen. I moved to the next document, the zoning application, the appraisal comparison. $287,000 residential, $415,000 commercial. The math in 2 columns, nothing ambiguous about it. "Your husband planned to reclassify my property without my knowledge, sell it at commercial appraisal value, and split the premium with." I paused and looked directly at his father-in-law's box on the screen. His partner. I shared the email. "The Missionary Ridge parcel is moving forward. Owner doesn't know the scope yet. We're positioned for Q1 close. Commission splits as discussed." My son's father-in-law went very still. "Cole," his voice was quiet and flat, "what is this?" "It's not what it looks like. I'm asking you what it is." My son said nothing. "There's one more thing," I said. I moved to the last document, Kendall's demand letter, formal and clean. $42,000 borrowed 3 years ago. Due date passed 2 years ago. I've been patient. That patience is done. You have 30 days. My son's wife turned to look at him. "You borrowed money from your father?" "It was for the business." 3 years ago, and you never told me?" Her voice changed in a way I hadn't heard before. Not anger. Something more foundational than that. The particular quiet that comes from discovering the shape of something you've been living beside without knowing it. I gave everything a moment to settle. "One last thing," I said. "The scratch ticket, the one you slid across the table at Thanksgiving, in front of 22 people. I let that land for a second. I checked it." My son looked up. I didn't say the number. I didn't need to. The point wasn't the amount. The point was something else entirely. "It won," I said. "Enough that I'm not afraid of anything you had planned. The house stays mine. When I'm gone, it goes to your sister. That has been updated in writing, notarized, and filed." My son stared at his screen from Cancun, in the soft light of a resort, the drink sweating on the table behind him. "You set this up," he said finally. "I told the truth," I said. "You set this up. I just showed everyone what was there." His father-in-law closed his laptop without a word. His box went dark. My son's wife had shifted her chair slightly away from him. A small thing, maybe unconscious. I saw it. "We're done here," I said. "The Real Estate Commission will be in touch. Call Kendall if you want to discuss the loan." I looked at my daughter's box in the corner of my screen. She was sitting forward, both hands in her lap. "Jolene," I said, "I'll call you tomorrow." She nodded. Her eyes were bright. I ended the call. The house was very quiet. The clock on the mantel ticked. Outside, the ridge was dark against the December sky, the way it always is this time of year, bare trees and cold stars and the stillness that settles over this part of Tennessee in winter. My son's real estate license was suspended 4 weeks later, pending investigation. Kendall told me the inquiry had turned up irregularities in 2 other listing agreements. Different clients, different properties, the same method. Other families who had trusted someone, who had learned to treat trust as inventory. His father-in-law released a statement distancing himself from any involvement in the Missionary Ridge transaction. My son lost the Cancun tan before he lost the professional standing, and they came back from Mexico early. His wife filed for legal separation in January. I heard about it through my daughter. I didn't reach out. She hadn't been cruel to me directly, but she had stood in that dining room every holiday for 4 years and never once said the word stop, and I needed time before I could think clearly about what that meant. My son called me twice in January from a number I didn't recognize. I listened to both messages. In the first, he was angry. In the second, he sounded tired, the way people sound when the anger runs out before the situation resolves. He said he knew he'd made mistakes. He said he was sorry. He said he hoped I would call him. I sat with the messages for a week before I deleted them. An apology is a beginning, not an end. I've spent 31 years teaching students the difference between an argument that earns its conclusion and one that just stops. He hadn't earned his landing yet. My daughter drove up from Knoxville on a Saturday in February, and we made the peach cobbler together, my wife's recipe from the spiral notebook. We stood in the kitchen, and my daughter read off the ingredients while I measured, and we talked about her work, about a patient who had recovered from something the odds said he shouldn't have, about the drive along the river in the fog on cold mornings. When the cobbler was in the oven, she sat at the kitchen table and looked around the room, the west-facing window, the porch, the ridge in the distance. "I used to be scared you'd sell this place," she said. "I know. I never told you that." "I knew anyway." She was quiet for a moment. "What happens now? With your son?" I thought about that, about what it means to have a child who looks at his father and sees an asset to be managed, about the long, slow education in understanding who people actually are versus who we need them to be. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe someday he does the real work and becomes someone worth knowing again. Maybe he doesn't. Either way, I'll still be here." I took the cobbler out at 38 minutes, the way the notebook said to, until the edges just start to pull from the sides of the dish. We sat on the porch with 2 bowls and let the cold air be cold and the cobbler be warm, and we didn't talk about my son for the rest of the evening. The scratch ticket is in the drawer of my desk now, in a small plastic sleeve I found at the hardware store. $60,000. My son spent $2 on it without thinking about what he was handing me. He slid it across a white linen tablecloth as a punchline and turned back to the real conversation. I keep it as a reminder, but not of the money, of something older than that, the idea that the things people dismiss without looking closely, a retired teacher, a paid-off house on a ridge, a peach cobbler nobody touched, have a way of holding more than people expect. I still get emails from former students. They send me their graduate school applications, their arguments, their essays. I mark them up the way I always did. I ask the same question I asked for 31 years at the end of every unit. What does this actually mean? What are you actually saying? The answer takes a long time to find. It took me 63 years to find mine. The house is still standing. My daughter is coming for dinner on Sunday, and for the first time in a long time, that is more than enough.